Was a place where so many of my dreams have come true.
The Ride with JMV on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Hey, welcome in Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us. Busy one. Jake Fischer, Yahoo, bottom of the hour. Chappell's going to be here coming up in the 5 o'clock hour, too. A lot of stuff to tell you about, stuff to give away. Farm Aid tickets again for day number 3. Farm Aid tickets officially on sale July the 15th. You can win them before you buy them with me once again coming up later on this afternoon. I feel you, right? I don't get a great deal of enjoyment out of the ESPYs. That doesn't automatically make me, or make, if you feel the same way, you a hater. I just don't get a great deal of enjoyment out of it. That's funny. Maybe it is something that I will appreciate, and probably won't, but maybe it is when we get a couple of steps into the future. Here's why. So I go back, I think this is 1998. Somebody had brought up the great and the late Norm Macdonald hosting it back in 1998, and that was outrageously awesome to watch that monologue, and I had forgotten about it completely. I think that was like year number 6 for the ESPYs back then, something like that. I had completely forgotten about it. And again, how mortified that the ESPN folks were when he went out there and did that monologue, and how most people suggest that he's just not right for that. Because we know this. I mean, really, it's probably anybody. Like, I consider myself, there are times when I guess, and I've said this before, I don't start it, I just finish it in terms of Twitter. Sometimes you just feel like firing back. Like, I don't go and look for it. Thus, I consider myself fairly secure, if not very secure. Now, there are times in the past when I didn't feel that way, but I feel that way right now. And you look, and when you're making jokes, especially of athletes in the audience, that's where you can get to an area where a lot of these dudes aren't going to be able to laugh at it like you think it's funny in saying it. But I went back and watched the full monologue, and again, I believe it was 1998, of the late Norm Macdonald, the comedian at the time, was doing the SNL weekend updates. I thought it was hilarious. Like, when the way that we viewed it back then is, oh my goodness, I can't believe he did that. I can't believe he said that. Like, now would be, to me, rather undramatic. Back then, it was a big deal. I can't believe they let him do that. I mean, he had that Charles Woodson joke regarding, OJ and Ron Goldman. Had a couple of others in there. It was all really good. So, again, maybe this is something that if I double back, because it's so much easier to do that now, you double back and you watch it again, maybe you become further into the future, when looking back on it, a little bit more appreciative of it. Maybe. But that's kind of how I felt last night. I did not even know that USA, like, I get lost in all the soccer stuff. I do like when Team USA is playing somebody, whether it's the Gold Cup, and I've talked about the World Cup, or even if it's one of these international friendly things, I normally will watch that. And I'd completely forgotten about it last night. USA and Panama. Team USA ousted from the Gold Cup. I spent a lot of time watching basketball and a lot of time watching the Summer League. I don't know where you are with that right now, especially with the Pacers last night, and you knew that was going to go that way because the guys that had been on an NBA roster, in this case the Pacers a year ago, those are the guys that have been putting up the numbers. Those are the guys that have been the major difference when the Pacers are out and winning games, and you knew when those guys were done, when they were shelved, you knew so probably was winning at least at that clip. The undefeated nature of this team would have been lost. And I know you're not really playing for a great deal, but I do hesitate to say that because there are dudes out there that are playing for a lot. Even if you don't make it to the NBA, where you end up getting paid to play, and I've said this for a number of years, and I've been around some guys. I give you a great example. I bring him up all the time. Max Landis, the son of Mike Landis. Mike Landis, a good friend of mine, both of Perry Meridian. Max has played, I think he's in double digits now, in Portugal. And I've always had a deeply rooted admiration for that because he gets to do what I love to do, but he gets paid. He gets to live in Portugal in the early stages of his life when he's able to get out and do some stuff. And they take care of everything. It may not come with the glitz and the glamour that you see with the NBA or even with what you see in Summer League. But, man, being paid to play. I mean, we're all out there jacking around, and nobody's paying us a dime. In fact, we have to pay to go someplace and play now. You are very fortunate if you're able to go someplace and play that still has pickup basketball around here where you don't have to put money in to participate for a couple of hours, to rent the space, to rent the court. And I've always had a deeply rooted admiration for those that are able to continue their career no matter what level. Like the runs they've been having, and the reason I bring this up is Kanon Catchings of the Star has had, a couple of different stories about those dizzy runs I think they're having at Mojo up in Noblesville. Well, there are a lot of guys with name recognition that we know, a couple of Teagues. I think Andre Owens is a part of it. Joey Brunk from Southport's a part of it. Ryan Weber from Ron Colley is up there. And a lot, if not most of those dudes have been playing for pay over the years since they got out of high school. And I have a great deal of admiration for that. Now, you don't have to start this is my have-to responsibility as an adult because basketball ultimately is a game. If you can push that out, as long as you can, do it. I've always said this to some of those guys I talked to. There are a couple of different times. I was working at a tire shop when I first got out of college. I didn't get a chance to go to Belgium or go to Germany or then go to Portugal. I went to Team and Tire. And there was no glamour around that. So I always have that level of admiration for those guys that continue their career in that fashion. Thus, I look at these guys that are doing the Summer League in Las Vegas in kind of similar fashion. It's always, you don't see a lot of them, but you see some dudes that make a name for themselves in this. You're looking for some, like Jarace Walker is what we've been looking for. Jarace Walker is a guy that so far has given us, I believe, given us exactly what we expected. And in turn, exactly what we want. Like, if you're going to size up watching Jarace Walker, the number 8 overall selection, the first round, one of 2 by the Pacers, you would probably say this guy has been exactly what you wanted. Now, as always, the precursor is it's just Summer League. But things can work out much worse. You can get injured, check. You can look like you don't belong. You can look like that even with that group, maybe you're not going to be ready, rotationally speaking. And we're going to go through all this again. Like what Jarace Walker has provided just says, all right, this guy looks like he's going to be able, as a rookie, maybe not consistently, but able as a rookie to give this team some help. And they need help. They need help in a lot of different areas. Oftentimes in the offseason, for a team that didn't make the postseason, for a team that won 35 games, we have been doling out a great deal of admiration. We've been doing that because our belief is that it's pointed in the right direction right now. That's the feeling. And part of that is, watching Walker play. And I know that the consistency with Sheppard hasn't been there. I mean, he was off and then on and then off again and then on again and then off again. That consistency hasn't been there. But for the 8th overall selection, he has been exactly what you thought. Exactly what you're looking for. And it remains to be seen whether or not that's going to make, a translation, if you will, to the NBA level. But it makes you feel good. And you're in a much better spot than you would be had otherwise thought, he's not playing well, or an injury, or it doesn't look like that even with this group, he's ready to go right now. Much better position. And in turn, that's how you're going to view Anthony Richardson. you're going to find yourself saying, well, he is doing this when he makes a good pass, when he does something, because you're going to be inundated, absolutely hit over the head with play-by-play updates of Anthony Richardson. I don't even know if you're tired about it right now. You may be tired of it, but you might as well get ready for it because it is going to be endless. It is going to be just an over-the-top, ridiculous over-analyzation of a guy that played 13 games collegiately, and there's a great deal of unknown. But again, that's the reason why this will take place. And regardless, we will be judging. We'll be judging. Even if we get reminded that it's training camp, just like you get reminded that it's summer league, we will be judging. And just like with Jarace Walker, we'll be judging whether or not we believe this guy under center is good to go. Because still floating around in the air right now is the thought to where the Colts and Shane Steichen want to take their time and they want to make sure that he is absolutely ready, to protect himself. I can't imagine what the excuse might be other than injury, which you don't want either, but what the excuse might be if he's not ready. Because to me, that is an alarm saying, well, not only is he not ready right now, but I don't know when this guy's going to be ready. So you don't want that. We're going to be judging. We're going to be judging every single play. Every time you see a video of a play of a Richardson pass, we are all going to be judging. That just comes with the territory. And you know what? It comes with the territory because it is new. And we really didn't even get that, if you remember, in the Andrew Luck rookie season. It just was a foregone conclusion because you'd seen so much of him out there playing for Stanford. Seen so much, heard so much. It was a foregone conclusion that he was going to translate, and he was going to do so sooner rather than later. And then you go through the Luck years, and then he bails, and then you get Jacoby Brissett. And when you think about it, the judging went away. I can't remember the last time you really put out a great judgment. Because if you remember, we even talked ourselves into Carson Wentz. I mean, at the time, there was people, especially out of Philadelphia, skeptical about that. But, you just kind of waited. You really didn't judge the veterans that have been on this carousel brought in here to try to rectify things after Luck bailed. You really haven't judged these guys until the season is underway. We're going to be judging this guy every single pass, every single play he's in there. Fair or unfair, that's exactly how it's going to go down during training camp. And we're going to get the same thing. We'll see exactly what they see. But you look back and what is it? 1, 2, 3... We're going back 4 years now. 4 years, basically, because you just thought, all right, so Phillip Rivers, you know what you're going to get. There was no judgment there. And really not a lot of judgment even on Carson Wentz. And then ultimately, when he ended up getting Matt Ryan, the same thing was true. I mean, you heard things from Atlanta. But you were talking yourself into, everybody was talking themselves into, this being a great solidifier under center. And of the 3 aforementioned quarterbacks, that was the worst. That was worse than Carson Wentz. So really, every single series, every single play, every single throw, the mannerism in which it is going to absolutely... It's going to swallow you up right here. So just be ready for it. It's been a long time since you've been in that position. I was trying to think exactly when was the last time, because even when Manning came in here, you felt secure that it ultimately was going to happen. Like with this, there's just such a deeply rooted level of unknown that you remain skeptical, and you just take those bits and pieces. For example, you put stuff together like last year. You think about this. All right, what happens if you had a quarterback last year with a stronger arm? What happens last year if you had a mobile quarterback that couldn't get tackled by his own shadow? What happens if you had that? Would that have made things different? I'm not suggesting that it does, but I know that those are questions that are being asked. Would it have been that much of a difference? Does a guy like this, because he is mobile, does it make a difference with the offensive line? Does it, with a stronger arm, does it make a difference in, who knows if he's going to be able to throw it into a window? But, let's face it, over the years, how many windows have we seen around here over the years? When's the last time that you saw a window? Not a lot of throwing windows out there. So you ask yourself that question. And you also remind yourself that it's just training camp, but you get a little bit of, in this case, a little bit of a pop quiz. I know they do that in the morning. A little bit of a pop quiz from going through the Pacers and the Summer League and going into a situation that I don't think people around here have seen at the quarterback position, or at least felt this way in a long time, forever. Because, again, you didn't feel that way with Luck. You didn't feel that way with Manning. And you certainly didn't feel that way the last 3 years. Yeah, let's face it. I mean, when Luck decided to bail with 2 weeks remaining before the start of the season, the last thing you were thinking about was something like this. You were just thinking about how's this team going to survive and how much you felt screwed. And this is going to be as different of a feeling. Now, position by position, yeah, I'm sure you've been there before with that. But not with the most coveted, not with the most important position in professional sports. You have not felt that way. So we will talk about that. I know that a couple of night practices, one of which with the Bears, that I'll be out there, I'm assuming, and be a part of. If you remember a year ago, I don't even think I made it out there. Like a year ago, everything was like a morning or an early afternoon type of practice. And then ultimately, if you want me to go out there and sit in the parking lot, that's great. But people here, and thank you very much, decided not to send me out and sit in the parking lot. But there's going to be a great deal of interest. So a lot of people are suggesting, I think you're selling this team too short. I've been asked about the over-under. So if you set it at 6, why are you taking the under? So you don't think this team's going to be much better than what we witnessed last year? I think it's going to be tough. To me, you don't go over 7 sitting here right now. There is such an unknown. You've got to go under 6. I don't think if, for example, you win 5, you're 1 off the pace of a year ago, I don't think that means disaster. I think you can still have growth in that. I mean, let's face it, last year, it was like the scene in Animal House with the Stork, when the Stork was the band leader. Remember, he took over for the band leader in the parade march, and he took the band down the alley, and they just, kept running into the brick wall in the alley. Just kept doing it over and over again. That's exactly what last year felt like. Even with the changes. And these are not so subtle changes, but that's what last year felt like. This is going to have a different feel. You may, and I'm not trying to tell you to set the bar low or to have low levels of expectations. You just know where this team is right now. That's exactly what they're thinking. And again, as I talked about yesterday, and I'll talk about, I'm sure, again, because this is going to be at the top of the list of things discussed once training camp is officially underway, is when and how much and for how much time will they extend Jonathan Taylor. And it kind of seems like that I'm out there on Gilligan's Island right now telling people how important it is compared to the rest of the NFL and how they view the running back position. But those that are anti my thoughts on it, I just don't think you get the big picture here. And the big picture is more solidified with the smaller picture. And that is the start. That is the acclimation. That is the support. All of which is necessary for this guy to transform. For him to evolve. Mike Chappell is going to join us coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. We'll have a discussion on that. Alex Golden setting the pace coming up 4:30 or so. Jake Fischer of Yahoo has been all over a lot of these rumors in the NBA, and we'll dive into yet another one regarding Siakam. And some of that stuff was as they said in Seinfeld in the episode, if you remember, the saxophone playing episode, if you remember that, it hot and heavy. Hot and heavy last week, not so hot and heavy this week. So I mean, that's when you get ready for something to happen, when it's not hot and heavy. When it's hot and heavy, I mean, this stuff, the whole Lillard stuff is going to happen, I think, when you least expect it. You'll forget about it for the moment. You'll be thinking about something else, and then all of a sudden, hey, Damian Lillard's traded probably to Miami because that's what he wants. Most of the time, these guys get that. And if something happens with Siakam, something doesn't happen with Siakam, maybe he gets extended in Toronto, it will happen when you least expect it. But a number of trade rumors that have been started by Jake Fischer of Yahoo. He covers the NBA. He's going to join me coming up at the bottom of the hour. Win them before you buy them. July the 15th, tickets go on sale. Of course, that is tickets to Farm Aid, Neil Young, John Mellencamp, Willie Nelson, Dave Matthews, Tim Reynolds, and a lot more. Bob Weir, I think, is out there, too. So, you know, our good friend Brett Halverson is going to be all excited about that. Give you a chance to win those tickets. A re-entry from anybody involved in Farm Aid coming up coming up in September, but tickets going on sale on the 15th. Re-entry number 9 is going to have you get a couple of tickets with no charge, just for listening. To Farm Aid from this show coming up a little bit later on. Now, it's funny, I was reading something as I was talking right there. Somebody sent me, hey, JMV, I know you're a huge fan of Up in Smoke and the next movie from Cheech and Chong. Do all these Cheech and Chong gummy ads on Twitter wear you out? I do know this. Evidently, Cheech and Chong's gummies are officially 100% legal. And every time you open up Twitter, you're going to see Tommy Chong or you're going to see Cheech Marin, and they're going to be propping up their gummies. Seriously. You see that more than you see anything else. I will say this. Like Up in Smoke is such a classic. I could never get tired of it, and I could never be mad at Cheech and Chong because they created that cinematic masterpiece. That's exactly what it is. Watch it again. Watch it today. It is good today as it was when it came out and played at all these drive-ins back in 1978. Up in Smoke. The van made of pot. Oh, it's so good. But yes, I have noticed that, to answer your question, an incredible amount of tweets from Cheech and Chong about their gummies. You guys are digging on the gummies. Hey, JMV, this is a picture of Lucas Oil Stadium from the inside out with the window closed and the backdrop of downtown Indy. And it says, I just hope he doesn't throw it through this window. I will say this. I'd like to see if he's able to throw it through the window, but I would agree. You are going to see, and I will tell you this right now, nothing against Anthony Richardson, nothing against anybody. You are going to see misses that would make you think at times he would be unable to throw it through that window. Just the way that it is. Just the way that it is. Hey, JMV, I'm in the camp that Taylor is replaceable. Reason is, with an unproven rookie quarterback that can scramble the defense, you're going to stack the box, key in on the running game. I see a lot of 40 to 60-yard rushing games for Taylor. Can spend that money on so much more. I'm telling you what, Josh, you want to go into games this season? The first time Anthony Richardson plays in the NFL, week number 1, you want him to go into games without Jonathan Taylor being any sort of threat? And I'll put it to you this way. It's like what I talk about with Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield is good for the Pacers when he's not shooting, when he's on the floor, because you have to tag him. You have to make a note that he is there. You have to check him. He's big when he's even on the floor. Jonathan Taylor is big and noticeable when he is on the field. Again, this is different. We'll dive into more of that coming up in just a bit. Again, Mike Chappell in the 5 o'clock hour. Alex Golden setting the pace coming up at 4:30. And we'll get set on the other side with Jake Fischer, I believe, for the first time on this show from Yahoo. We'll talk some NBA trade rumors, and more with Jake coming up in just a bit. Farm Aid tickets, too. And hey, remind me of this. If you're because the reason why I bring this up, I guess, as I go to a break, is that I'm doing a 90s JMV takeover on Saturday, right, on B105.7. We're doing nothing but the 90s. And in the 90s, there were various, 5, 6, 7 bands that you can name right now that played a lot of gigs, from the Vogue to the Bluebird, Lafayette, Muncie, all over the place that we remember. And I brought them up before: The Chosen Few, the Y Store, of course, with Chris Schaefer, Push Down and Turn, Real Eyes. Bands like that, Johnny Sacco. Situation Grey was one. And did you know that Situation Grey is putting it back together? The band is back together and playing a show at the Vogue coming up on Friday. I'm telling you, that's going to be can't miss, especially if you want to stir the echoes of the incredibly awesome time you had in the 1990s, whether it was at the Bluebird for a quarter beer night on Thursday or wherever. Situation Grey will do that for you. Situation Grey, Friday night at the Vogue. Coming back together again. I'll dive into more of that. Maybe have some tickets for you a little bit later on as well. All right, quick break and we shall return. I mentioned Alex Golden, Mike Chappell. We got Jake Fischer of Yahoo talking NBA trade rumors, especially those that surround either Siakam or now you got some brewing in terms of T.J. McConnell. We'll talk to Jake about that coming up on the other side. Inside the Lounge via YouTube Live, HD Radio, the stream, the app, and 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. I just got to see McAfee last night of the ESPYs, if you watch the ESPYs. I would advise you, though, if you get a couple of minutes, don't do it right now, especially if it takes you away from this show, because we won't have that. But if you get time, the late Norm Macdonald from 98, his monologue on the ESPYs to start is outrageously awesome. Promise. Back to that and more in a second. Alex Golden setting the pace. 4 o'clock hour. Mike Chappell is going to be here in the 5. Farm Aid is coming to September. Ruoff Home Mortgage Music Center. You can win them before you buy them. A little bit later on, listen to win for Farm Aid coming up in September here in central Indiana. But on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, you can find all his work with Yahoo Sports. He is their senior NBA reporter and the author of a great deal of content here recently. Jake Fischer joins the show here. Hello, Jake. How you doing, man?
What's going on? How are you?
A lot of content, a lot of conversation that you have brought to the table for a lot of us that love the NBA. So job well done. Well done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're just trying to call around the league and bring as much context to what's happening beneath the surface as we can.
Well, I'm glad we start out this way because I'm curious. It was a little bit more, again, the Seinfeld reference is hot and heavy regarding the rumor of Pascal Siakam last week and that of the Pacers. So a couple of things here. What ultimately do you think happens here? And then how hot and heavy might the Pacers be involved in any level of conversation with Toronto about Siakam?
Just looking at the situation and recognizing that, for whether, I don't know if Pascal's people have directly called all these teams and said, he doesn't want to come there like it seems like what's happening with Damian Lillard. But pretty much every team I've spoken to around the NBA is of the impression that Pascal Siakam only wants to sign an extension that he's eligible for this summer with the Toronto Raptors. Now, the Pacers, I think, would be a far more intriguing situation for him. This is just me looking at the board. I don't want to speak for Pascal, but I have to imagine for someone and for part of the reason why his, maybe let's say, less than an affinity for extending with Atlanta, that's been the other big, the Hawks have been the biggest team linked to him and have valued him for some time. They've got a Super Bowl dominant point guard in Trae Young, of course. Pascal has had plenty of, ball handling, rip the ball at the rebound, bring it up in transition. He's running pick and roll as the ball handler type stuff. I feel like in a team with Tyrese Halliburton and his ball-moving connectivity, there might be greater opportunities for his willingness to re-sign with the Pacers if they were to make a deal. But at this point, I think the Pacers have just checked in on every single power forward that's presumably available on the league for the last 2 years. I don't know right now. I haven't gotten enough information to suggest that their interest in Pascal is anything more than that.
Yeah, see, and that's what I think. And I don't know what your belief is about this, but I've said it all along, Jake, is I think the Pacers are in a spot to where you check in on it, but they're not in a position right now where I think you make that type of move. And that's not a defeatist attitude. That's just the reality of it. You go from 25 wins to 35 wins. We're going to expect 45 wins, I'm sure, if not plus, this coming year. We're going to raise the bar on it, but not as high as it would seem to be if you're actually going out there and trying to reel in Pascal Siakam for what could just be 1 year.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be worth – that's the big thing, the 1 year. If he isn't giving assurances or the idea or the impression, whatever word you want to use to avoid any tampering allegations, he's going to be happy to land wherever, Indiana or wherever, he gets moved. Toronto is, by all accounts, from every team I've spoken with, they are asking for very high valuations for all their players, dating back to 2 trade lines ago, maybe even 3 now at this point, before Kyle Lowry left in free agency. And I think it'd be really challenging for a team like Indiana to give up whatever that asking price ends up being for Pascal without the idea that he's going to be there long term.
It's Jake Fischer of Yahoo Sports, senior NBA reporter via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So if you had a thought right now to make, what do you think happens to Siakam? Where is he playing coming up, at least for the 23-24 season, however long that might be? Where does he start the season, in your estimation?
My estimation right now would suggest that it's not Toronto, being that more than ever it seems like his marriage there has not been a happy one, where he's been a staple of Summer League all throughout his career. He's seen courtside, he's in the gym practicing with teammates. He was not there this week in Las Vegas, and I do not believe that was a coincidence. I've heard that wasn't a coincidence. So I don't know where he's going to go. Atlanta is the one that seems to make the most sense, being that they've got pieces they could send. They've got a lot of salary that could match, and they've been the team all along that's been communicated to me as like the hottest on his tail, if you will. But I can't pinpoint them because they haven't gotten it done to this point. They've been talking about this for well over a month now. So I don't know if it's going to be the Hawks, but there's definitely a strong sense around the league and among people in particular who are familiar with Toronto and Siakam that he's probably not going to be back with the Raptors.
Jake Fischer of Yahoo talks NBA on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So we'll start with T.J McConnell, and if you've heard anything about any other Pacers possibly on the move, how much interest is there out there on the McConnell front that you have heard as of right now?
Yeah, so the only thing I've heard on TJ has been this interest from the Phoenix Suns. And, the Suns have plenty of scores. They've got plenty of scorers who can score off the dribble. They don't have a point guard right now, a real starting level point guard right now, in the absence of sending out Chris Paul for Bradley Beal. And it does seem like Phoenix is looking to move on from campaign with the hope of finding someone a little bit better than him, but not someone who's going to be taking the ball out of the hands of their scorers. And that is someone like T.J. McConnell, who, if you look at the Pacers roster, I mean, he's definitely behind Tyrese Halliburton and Aaron Nembhard on the bench. I wonder how, and people on the league are wondering how long he is for that situation if he is so buried on the bench and would have so much value in his own expiring contract. So I expect if he's not a big name to keep an eye on at the trade deadline, if he isn't moved by then, I'd be surprised. I don't want to start throwing, the rumor mill into full action, say T.J. McConnell on the trade block. I think this is right now more of a situation of teams calling about him than anything else. But I do think more and more teams will call, just being that he is a very good player, considered a very good locker room guy. But he does have some really strong connections to the front office that I also think would make it a little bit more challenging than the average player to part with if you're the Pacers.
Yeah, and I'm glad you phrased it that way, too, because besides T.J. McConnell, are the Pacers getting calls on Buddy Hield right now, from what you know?
I haven't heard a ton on Buddy. Just the thought that his salary would probably be a key outgoing piece if they were to try to go get someone with the salary figure of Pascal Siakam. Just looking at it, I mean, if you're adding a piece to that magnitude, you're not putting Miles Turner in the deal. The next highest salary after Miles Turner is Daniel Tice. And I would think that from a trade value, if you're sending out pieces to a team that's sending away a big caliber player, you're probably wanting to get back if you're that other team, if you're Toronto or someone else. You're probably going to want to get back players who are either impact players right now who can help you or guys who have retrade value. I wouldn't say Daniel Tice does. And below that list, all the other guys are all young prospects that Indy wants to grow with. Mathurin, Toppin is traded for, the number 8 pick in the draft, Jarace Walker. I think that any big trade like that, it just pretty seems like an automatic thing that it'd be Buddy Hield's salary going out.
I'm going to double back with Jake Fischer of Yahoo. One question and get back to that Phoenix Pacers connection you'd mentioned with McConnell. We had talked about a year ago this time, and it lasted for all of about 90 minutes. The restricted free agent, the offer sheet that was signed here by DeAndre Ayton, and then ultimately matched in Phoenix, and they have him. How actively, if at all, are they looking for another place for their big man?
They definitely were before the draft. There was some talk with Dallas that I know about. I think they called up Portland again and wanted to see what their interest was. But I haven't heard of anything that's really made significant progress. And I don't think they're just going to move him to move him. The Suns are so limited in assets right now. They just traded 2 future first-round pick swaps to Memphis in order to get 3 second-round picks to be able to have some extra capital to juice a couple of deals here and there. So they're not just going to move one of their only movable players just to move them. They're going to make sure, just like the Lakers with Russell Westbrook a year ago, they're going to make sure that they don't just move him for something at cap savings or whatever. They want to make sure that they're going to get something of actual value back in return.
All right, Damian Lillard, which is something that you cover like it is a huge soap opera continuously, Jake. How do you think this ultimately gets resolved?
I'm sorry, can you say that?
How do you think this whole Damian Lillard situation with the trade request and all that is out there informationally, how do you think this ultimately gets resolved, Jake?
You know, it's going to be a big staring contest, I think, between Portland and Miami and Dame. And, you know, the longer this situation drags out, Portland is certainly hoping that this could be a thing like Donovan Mitchell last year, where it was just between, you know, New York and Miami in theory, and then just New York, and then all of a sudden it dragged down so long, Cleveland decided, you know what, we've got the assets, we can make a play here, we can make this work, and Donovan sounds like he'd be at least amenable to coming here. Portland has to be hoping that the longer this thing stretches out, Dame's going to relent, and then it's going to be not just Miami or bust, and that could potentially upgrade the talks and bring in more bidders and hopefully get a richer return from the Blazers side of things. But until that happens, this is going to be a Dame to Miami situation that I think gets ultimately resolved, and it comes maybe even becomes a 4-team trade. It's going to have to at least be a 3-team trade to reroute Tyler Hero somewhere else, because he's not someone that the Blazers are keen on bringing back. But at this point, as long as Damian Lillard maintains and holds firm and draws a line in the sand that it's Miami or nothing, I think it's going to be Miami or nothing. Meaning, if it isn't Miami, I do think there's a chance, just like with James Harden in Philly, that Dame is back in Portland starting training camp next year.
You think, James, are you thinking right now that Harden is back in Philly, or do you think the likelihood that he moves is what we're going to see?
I mean, both Philly and Portland, they're puffing out their chest and standing tall and saying, we don't have to trade you, and we're not going to unless we get a commensurate haul back, and we're willing to take this thing into training camp. So I believe the Philly side of things more so than the Portland side of things, because we've seen it. We saw it happen with Ben Simmons, being that Daryl Morey knew in his heart of hearts that he was going to be able to trade him for someone with James Harden's caliber come, you know, by the trade deadline. That's what happened. So ironically, it's now Harden who they got in replace of Simmons, kind of pulling the same thing. A little bit different of a situation because Simmons had 4 years left on his deal and Harden's now expiring contract. Same thing with, similar to the Dame situation, but not with him. I'm wondering, as the longer this goes, will another team out of nowhere just say, you know what, we'll give Philly something that satisfies their wishes, because we know that at least Harden's going to be an expiring deal and we can just kind of wipe our cap sheet clean. You know, if a team was, you know, if Chicago with Zach LaVine, for example, wanted to get really aggressive and try to trade Zach for Harden just to kind of clear the books and get LaVine's that's not me reporting or having that conversation. I'm just kind of putting two and two together. That would make sense. Something like that, or any team that's got long-term money on their books that wants to that thinks they can help Philly get better now and help Joel Embiid compete for a title in the first year under Nick Nurse, while also maybe, you know, cleaning up their own books as the salary structures just continue to get higher and higher here.
It's Jake Fischer with us via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Before I let you go, any other names floating around out there that may be worthy of watching as we move forward, obviously past July and, you know, close in on the start of camps a couple of months from now?
Yeah, I think Evan Fournier is not a big name, but he's going to get traded at some point here. The Knicks want to trade him. He wants to get traded, and I am curious to see what he could do in a different environment where, you know, 2 years ago he was someone that Boston was trading for as like trade deadline reinforcements to compete for a championship. Will there be some team that can look at him and repurpose him as a valuable shooter in that championship contending situation kind of similarly to how Duncan Robinson came back from the dead at $18 million in his salary to be one of the most important players for Miami in their run to the finals last year. I think a team that ends up bringing Evan Fournier into the fold might end up very, very happy that they did that come, the playoff time next year.
He is Jake Fischer, Jake L. Fischer on Twitter is where you can find his work. The senior NBA reporter, Yahoo Sports, with us via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline at Ball Don't Lie as well. You can check out his work. There's a lot of it out there. You can follow him. A good follow for NBA trade news and such. Jake, I appreciate you more than you know, and we'll check in again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
It's Jake Fischer right there, Yahoo Sports on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Alex Golden's in here setting the pace. We'll talk a little Summer League Pacers with Alex coming up at 4:30. Mike Chappell in the 5 o'clock hour as we close in on Colts training camp. A little bit of news today, high school-wise, regarding a tremendously talented local player and one of the teams at a high level we were looking for coming up in 23-24, high school basketball-wise, and a change of scenery. Kyle Neddenriep's going to join us at the top of the hour to explain that and more. That is coming up, and your chance to win. We've got tickets for you. Farm Aid, September, Ruoff Home Mortgage Music Center. Listen to win. 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
Down the
James over there, I'm John. Thank you for joining us. Jake Fischer, Yahoo Sports, NBA reporter. You at JMV 1070 via Twitter right now, too. No, that's me right there, isn't it? Sometimes I forget about that. Was that really loud? Gosh, not for me, man. I can't hear anything. That's terrible. I always thought it was selective hearing, but I do think that there's something not so great behind it. Maybe I can hear. Now, believe me, at times in my life, and I think a lot of you dudes will understand that too, it has served an incredibly positive purpose. It has. I've referenced that as selective hearing, but it may be a little bit worse than that. John writes this, so Kyle Guy puts on those dizzy runs. Super fun to go. Went there, actually the last two, free to get in at Mojo. Kids had a great time seeing local players. Yeah, I agree. They won't let me play. I don't know if anybody's going to insure me now if I can't. Actually, if I just can't use and make good choices on a ladder, can't have me. JMV, is it bad if I go to a store today and they already have their Halloween stuff up? I don't know if it's bad. It seems like it's the way that it is. What is today's date? July the 13th? What do you think? Halloween decorations up in stores on July the 13th.
I think that's too early.
Seems like it. I mean, it's not like we know that the summer is just flying by at a fever pitch here. I don't think we need more evidence of that. Because we can't do enough in the summertime. There's not enough time to do everything you want to do in the summertime. I don't think on July the 13th you need told even further by just simply walking into a place to pick something up that, hey, look, the Halloween decorations are up. You get the back-to-school stuff already up. So I would agree on that. Not that it matters and nobody cares, but I would absolutely agree on that. All right. Got a significant player bailing for overtime elite, which may end up, actually it will, shake a bit of the landscape here, high school basketball-wise. We'll talk about that and more, and a bit of a precursor, if you will, to the start of the football season. Kyle Neddenriep of the Star going to join us coming up next. Alex Golden setting the pace, Mike Chappell, 5 o'clock hour, and Farm Aid tickets. At some point, when you hear a Farm Aid artist re-entry, number 9 is going to go. Win them before you can buy them. 93.5, 107.5, The Fan. Joining us, hour number 2. Got nothing but the 90s coming up on Saturday night on B105.7. You guys going to be ready for, they named this band right here. Do you know this band? They're Canadian. That ring a bell? They had 2 rock songs in the 90s that were significant. One is called The Oath.
Nope.
And this is the other one called That Song.
No idea.
No idea. James has no idea. Do you consider yourself a rock aficionado?
I'm more of a metal guy.
Metal. So, yeah, this is not going to float your boat right here, is it? Big Wreck. Big Wreck. Canadian band, late 80s. Come on now.
Never even heard of them.
Come on now. Always one of those songs that somebody wants to hear during a Nothing But the 90s JMV takeover is Big Wreck in that song. Metal guy James has no idea. Alex Golden setting the pace, bottom of the hour. Mike Chappell is going to be in here coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. We've got Halloween decorations out at some stores on July the 13th. All hell is breaking loose. What are we doing here? And you get really good high school players blowing out of town for other opportunities. Joining us to talk about that and more from the Indianapolis Star, the fantastic high school beat writer and then some, Kyle Neddenriep, joins us. Hello, Kyle. How are you?
Hello, John. Could I request Belle Biv DeVoe poison?
You got that right. Would you rather, honestly, did you say poison because you wanted to hear that more or because you didn't want to request Do Me?
That's true. I mean, it's a one or the other.
Yeah. But, see, and I think sometimes people stay away from Do Me because it's Do Me, right?
Yeah, you just don't want to say it, right?
Yeah, so, but I think it's still it's like Poison's played all the time, but I think people stay away from Do Me because of that. So yeah, Do Me.
People sleep on it.
No doubt. No doubts about that. Speaking of that, you did some stories, a couple, regarding the Dizzy runs put on by Kyle Guy up at Mojo Up in Noblesville. It looked like you had a great time. Now, my phone didn't ring. Did your phone ring about being a part of these pickup games?
No, my phone only rang to come and cover it, which I'm glad it did because it was a blast.
Right.
I didn't, I kind of went up there not knowing, I hadn't been up there to it before, but it's such a cool thing. I mean, it's almost like a throwback to the old days of just pickup basketball and, seeing a lot, obviously covered a lot of those guys who were playing in it. So, catching up with them, I was like, man, I walked out of there feeling like, kind of rejuvenated. It was like super cool to catch up with everybody. And then I was like, I had to write, just talk to these guys about what, they might tell their former selves, their high school selves, and what they've learned. All those guys are still playing professionally in some form or fashion, or just coming out of college, or even some of them are even in college or high school. So, but yeah, I mean, it was so fun, and just sitting there talking to guys like Aaron Henry or Deshaun Francis or Joey Bronk. I mean, this is a lot of fun. I just really enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend it. If you like basketball, it's definitely a place to go watch some good hoops. I know Ryan Weber was up there too, playing from Roncalli, I believe, right? Yeah, I talked to Ryan for quite a while. Just sat there catching up with him, and he's a guy who got out of the game for a couple of years. He was working a 9-to-5 finance job, and then he decided to get back into it. Now I think he's going on his 5th or 6th year of playing professionally, overseas. So super cool. He's I think he may have a future in basketball somewhere as a trainer or whatever he wants to do, or a coach or whatever. So yeah, basketball, obviously there's a lot, the ball always stops bouncing for all of us at some point, or maybe not you still play, but but there's always different avenues, to get into, within the sport. And, I know a lot of these guys will end up going that route someday, and hopefully, I saw Deshaun Francis, he's like, I'd love to have my own team my own my own facility, and then start up my own team and have my name on jersey somewhere. So I think it's cool those guys give back in the ways that they do. I love it because, and I've said this to Max Landis before, who I don't even know how many years he's been overseas now. It may be even close to 10, but certainly a number of those playing in Portugal. He gets to, and of course, his dad and I are really good friends, and he gets paid to do what his dad and I love to do.
I mean, he gets paid. He gets paid a salary, room and board. You know, kids get to go to schools over there, English-speaking schools. I mean, everything is taken care of, and he gets to play basketball. So don't start the other aspects of your career. You know, like you mentioned with Ryan Weber doing finance. The finance stuff can work. Play basketball and get paid for it as long as you stinking can. That's everybody's dream, or at least every basketball fan's dream.
Well, that's one thing, I talked to those guys. That's exactly what Ryan told me. You know, he's like, he was working out. He was working his 9-to-5 job, but he was getting up each morning and he was working out with the trainer, Taylor Wayer, actually. And then he was doing stuff at night. And he's like, then he was playing in games with guys, like just pickup games, and like Taylor Persons from Kokomo is a good friend of his, and they were playing, and he's kind of like, why am I not? I'm doing all this stuff, yet I'm not getting paid for it, and trying to play, and so that's what kind of triggered him to come back. So that's definitely true. I mean, if you can, it's kind of like you have to maximize what you can, and you've got this ability and this skill that not everybody has, but it only lasts so long. You can't just do this when you're 50 and get paid for it. So you're absolutely right. I think that's, and it opens up other doors for you too. I mean, the more contacts you make and the more places you go, you're opening other doors that you may not even know are there. But yeah, I mean, to that extent, it was just like, I cover a lot of these guys in high school, and then, you keep in touch with some and some not, but it's like, it's just fun to be out there and kind of reconnect with some of those guys who, they might be a little older, a little maybe not as quick as they once were, but they've managed to, have and a guy like Aaron Henry, he's trying to get back to NBA. He's 23 and he's trying to get back to NBA, and he played with Victor Wembanyama last year. So, that was cool to talk to him about that too. And, so there's just a lot of fun, stuff. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It was a fun story to write.
No, it was good too. No, a lot of those guys that we have talked about for a variety of reasons over the years, and it's cool to see them come together. I think about Kyle Guy from this standpoint. I mean, you get up to the free throw line and you knock down 3 to tie like that in a Final Four setting. That still is absolutely incredible to me. I think I would have that like on my back on a video player wherever I went, showing that. I mean, that may be one of the most incredible things that we have seen, and we should talk about more.
Absolutely, and and you knew when it's him, it's like, oh, he's got ice in his veins, but who does? That's such a unique moment and in a point in time where it's like, who knows what it's kind of one of those roll of the dice things.
Can you imagine how I'd have crapped right down my leg?
I think I airballed the first one, and then it would have been over. But it's like, but he's that type of person, and credit to him too for doing a lot, organizing a lot of this stuff around the city and with basketball. And he's always been that type of guy to pour into where he's from, and I know a lot of kids look up to him now. Who he's going around to different schools and doing camps, and I know he had. Jaimin Henson and Kobe Webster with him, kind of going around and helping out to do some drills and training and stuff like that at different schools, and that's super cool too. Because we may know those guys, but this younger generation, they may not. So it's good to put a face with the name, and Kyle's obviously done that really well, and he's actually one of the guys. I didn't get a chance to catch up with him. I wish I would have. So hope he's doing well, and I'll try to get back out there and touch base with him.
It's Kyle Neddenriep of the Star with us via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. The headline today, and I'm curious if you thought this was going to happen, which I would guess would somewhat significantly change the 4A landscape at the very top, with Kanon Catchings going from Brownsburg now and heading to Atlanta, I believe it is, with overtime elite. Was that something you thought could have the opportunity of taking place?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some talk about it, and then Kanon came back and played with his high school team through June, and I know there's kind of hope that that would to continue and go on, but that was kind of always out there. I talked to his mom this morning, and we were just talking. She, in the story, she's quoted pretty significantly kind of about this process and, kind of the difficulty in making this decision. And, she said and I think this is probably the reality for most top 100 kids, or, he's ranked even higher than that, top 20 kids in the country. But there are so many doors that are open as far as prep schools, and Overtime Elite's not necessarily a prep school. It's kind of a league more than a prep school.
Does Damian Wilkins run that?
I know Corey Frazier is kind of the coach trainer. But yeah, there's several people obviously who are part of that. But yeah, so she kind of said, hey, it was one of those things. We went down there and visited the facilities are top notch. There's just a lot of things that that are definitely intriguing, and I think part of this too, and maybe. It was sort of at the beginning when they first started this, it was like they were competing, with colleges for kids. They were offering, it was said to be $100,000 contracts, and it was sort of like an option of, you either do this or you go to college. But now with NIL, some of these kids, including Kanon, will go there and maintain their college eligibility, and you have NIL opportunities, obviously, so you can kind of go there sort of on scholarship. To go there, and then you can earn name, image, likeness, but also maintain your college. So now, the colleges are kind of recruiting out of Overtime Elite. So it's not necessarily a competition between the two, but it's more of sort of what you would think of as a prep school situation. So, and it's not just that. I know, she said that part of this is that it kind of felt like. Maybe the traditional school's been a little bit harder for him, and this may be a better avenue for him to kind of prepare himself for Purdue and then beyond, hopefully, which I think he's definitely an NBA talent. He's just such a great offensive player, things you just can't teach. And obviously he's got the bloodlines as well, not only with his mom, but his aunt, obviously Tamika. So, and his grandpa, Harvey, who played in the NBA. So, but he's, I think it's all kind of, and Brownsburg knew, I talked to Steve Lynch about it, and he's quoted in there too. And they were, kept abreast of the situation. They knew sort of what was the possibilities of this. And, I don't think it's hard feelings. It's kind of like I said, it's the reality for a lot of these top kids anymore. And whether you want to go that route or not, but if you look down the list of top kids, if you go to Rivals or 24/7 or whatever, most of those kids are at some sort of prep school or not a traditional high school anymore. And, I don't love it, because you want to cover the best kids in their own high school, but I totally get it too. I mean, you're looking at your own future, and I'm not sure I wouldn't do the same thing if I was in that position. And
Overtime Elite, by the way, you remember Eamon Thompson, Asar Thompson, both went 4-5 to the Rockets and the Pistons in this last month's NBA draft. So, for those of you that don't exactly know what we're talking about, that is it right there. So this, at present time, and knowing that everything is subject to change now in sports, we know that. But at this present time, is his commitment still going to Purdue to play collegiately again as he stands right now?
Yes, I did ask her that, and she said, yeah, that's the plan. And I know a lot of people are wondering about that, but as far as that goes, and as far as what she told me, that's still the case. So, but yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, who knows? It's with recruiting too, it's like a dog year sort of. It's like things change very quickly, and I know some people were, and it's one of those things. There's always rumors and whatnot, but yeah, she said that's still nothing with that has changed because of this decision.
Hey, Kyle, how does this change? I mentioned this when I brought you on. How does this change the landscape? I know we're far away from the start of basketball season here, high school wise, but how does that change the top of the landscape, especially in 4A with Brownsburg losing a player of that level?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously it changes Brownsburg's situation, when you lose a guy like that. Now, they have played, he missed some stuff this summer because of, USA basketball and some of the other things that high-profile players are involved with. So they did get a chance to play some without him, I know, and and they do have a lot coming. Almost everybody. Elijah Diallo is gone, who was their second leading scorer last year. So now you lose your top two guys. But Grant Porath is back. There's a really good, supporting cast. Unfortunately, J.D. Lynch, who Coach Lynch's son, he tore his ACL, so he's on the mend, and they're hoping he'll be back and ready. But dealing with that as well. But yeah, they've got a good group. But yeah, when you lose a top, it'd be like anybody. If Fisher's lost Jalen Harrelson or whatever. I mean, those are the type of guys you just you don't replace by any one person. So it'll change it for sure. I think I had them, right there, top three in the state going in when I did the kind of the postseason stuff, and I can't imagine. I don't think they'll fall off completely, but it'll be hard. It'll be much harder, obviously, and but I think. If you talk to anybody around who's coached basketball in the state for a while, they know, what kind of job Lynch does in a year in and year out. So I'm sure they'll figure it out. But you can't just replace a guy like that. Kanon's almost unguardable. So when his shot's going down, I mean, he's really, really tough, and he can get his shot off on anybody. I know when they went up to Kokomo and played in the holiday tournament, I think he had 39 on Kokomo, and we saw what they did in their state run. So yeah, I mean, it does change. I would say, Ben Davis, I still think, I think people probably assuming they'll drop off a bit, but I still think they're going to be really good. I saw Lawrence North play this summer quite a bit. They're very good. Fishers is very good. So, it does, you might have to slot them behind them now, but we'll see. I mean, there's a long way to go, and roles change, and it's how those players adapt to those roles that kind of tell the tale once you get to February and March.
Again, we live in the moment because everything is subject to change. But as it stands right now, Flory, Kokomo, still solidly there. I mean, you hear rumors all the time. You hear more than I do, certainly on that level. But Flory, Kokomo, still good as far as where he's going to play this year is concerned.
Yeah, as far as high school, yeah, he's I think he's planning on playing soccer.
That's cool. I love that. That's great. That's great.
I saw him the other night, and that's I said, man, are you goalie? They're like, no, I'm a striker. So
that's
I'd love
great.
to see him play on the.
I get so sick and tired of the whole specialized one sport crap. I do. I know that means you're not very good whatever. I mean, I like the fact that, you get the multi-sport playing, because that's what Max Clark did at Franklin too, right? I mean, he was a multi-sport player as well. And still ended up third overall selection going to Detroit in this week's Major League Baseball amateur draft. I just love that.
I love it, yeah. And like I think I told you before, like those people in Franklin will always, I think, obviously they'll remember him first as a great baseball player, but I guarantee a lot of his football teammates appreciate the fact that he played football his senior year, and I doubt there's many guys drafted in the third round of any draft who are going to do that. But it's super cool that he did, and I think that'll always his community and school will always appreciate that about him.
Kyle, before I let you go, we're not too far away from the start of the high school football season here. I mean, you got workouts going on. Everybody's getting into gear. My friend across the road, Jeff Watson, is an official. And I know he's doing a lot of, practice games and scrimmages and such right now to get all these teams prepared. So where are we going? Where do we start at the top of the list as of right now before the season is underway with the best teams in Indiana in football?
Well, have you heard of a guy named Derek Moore?
Yeah.
He has a pretty good team.
I think I've heard of him before, yeah.
And I think
you're not going to see much of him around. You're going to see him at different places. They got four in-state schools on their schedule. That's it.
That's weird. Yeah, that's very weird. And
it's ridiculous is what it is, but yeah.
Yeah, it is. And they're going to be the team to beat. And, this is pretty rare territory they're in right now, going for 4 straight at that level of football. It's similar to the Warren Central run of 03 to 06. And, last year might have been the year to get them, because I don't know if they're going to fall off much from that team. And, but I think there's other teams like, Ben Davis is going to be very good. They're playing an interesting game this year with IMG Academy too. yeah, I mean, you have to start with Center Grove, obviously, and what they've got coming back with, Tyler Cherry and Noah Coy and Owen Bright and those guys. So that's kind of where you start, and then I think you kind of work your way through. And I do think Ben Davis is going to be really good. And they've got returning quarterback. They've got really good defensive players, running back, Mark Zachary, of course, in their secondary. So, but yeah, I mean, there'll be a lot of the HSE too. I think people, last year got a taste of what they did. They were right on the doorstep of making it to the state championship, and they got a lot of guys coming back too. So you'll probably start with those three, I would say, and then some of the normal contenders will be right there as well.
Yeah. So, 4, I believe it is Cathedral, Pike, and LN and LC, right, on CG's schedule. Everybody else is out of state, predominantly, I think, from the state of Ohio. But
yeah, and they started that event over in Massillon, Ohio, in the first Saturday there against St. Edward out of Cleveland area. So they're very good. Hopefully, I hope this isn't the normal scale. I hope they kind of get back to playing some of these teams they should be playing, in my opinion, and we get back to some of that. But
is that not somewhat similar? Not entirely the same here, Kyle, but is that somewhat similar to what Cathedral has been doing for a long time, though? It seems like Cathedral often has played almost as much, against Ohio teams or Kentucky teams at times they have Indiana teams. It hasn't been, to the point where it's only 4 with the state of Indiana, but they've done stuff like this before too, right?
Yeah, their schedule's typically been sort of like that. I would say this is a Center Grove schedule probably looks a lot like Cathedral's has been at times. There's been years where they played more state teams and more in-state teams, but yeah, they typically go to Cincinnati a couple times, or they have those teams, St. Xavier or Moeller, come here. That's been kind of the norm for them. Kind of the difference now is like, Center Grove hasn't played a lot of it. So it's, to a certain extent, it's interesting to see how they fare against these schools, but who doesn't want to see, Center Grove and Ben Davis, or Center Grove and Carmel, obviously. So those are the games I think people would get excited about. And in my opinion, and not even opinion, the fans show out in droves. So obviously they do want to see those games. So I hope at some point those, and I understand there's a lot more than just saying they should, but they should. So
listen, the commissioner of the IHSAA would agree too. He may not be, as vocal and boisterous at times as we can be about it, but come on now. Come on.
Yeah.
Just all
you
pretty
just
silly.
You hope it happens in the future. That's all you can really. I mean, I think some of the feelings, will subside, and hopefully those games get back on the schedule for the sake of, because that's what people want to see. I think that's basically what it comes
down. Then that stuff
to.
that happened on the basketball floor, and listen, I'm not suggesting that nobody was in the wrong whatsoever, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but I'm also not going to maximize it in this case. Crap like that happened in Greene County after every game. That was like a Tuesday night.
That was encouraging, Greene County, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You stick your head out of the bus window going through Bloomfield after a game, you're going to hit by a rock. So that's is what happened. So
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's hopefully those feelings subside and you get back to just playing the game. I've heard from kids on both sides who are like, we are an alumni of those places, schools who are like, hey, we those are the games we look forward to. So. How they feel about it.
All right, man. I appreciate you jumping on here. Good stuff too with the Dizzy runs and the Kanon Catchings story, and we'll see where all that goes as well. And stay at it. Maybe get a little bit of rest because your world is about to be turned upside down in less than a month. So be ready.
I'm looking forward to it. I appreciate you having me on, John.
Anytime, Kyle. Thank you. Kyle Neddenriep of the Star on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. It is less than a month away from the start of the high school football season if you need it. Mike Chappell, 5 o'clock hour. Alice Golden setting the pace on the other side, too. We got Farm Aid tickets to give away, so listen to win. It's 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
1075, The Fan.
Well, thank you, Kyle Neddenriep, for joining us. A little update high school-wise on the news of the day. Overtime elite in Atlanta for Kanon Catchings right there. CJ Miller writes this, Hey, JMV, I wonder what a best of the 2000s weekend or the best of the 2000s on the JMV takeover might be like. I will say this, CJ. I want to try to keep this in the 90s, the 80s, and then somewhat, with the 70s too. Yeah, here's why. Because I think other stations do all the more recent stuff. I don't want to steal the thunder, for example, from Dave Smiley. I've already been voted by the Smiley Bros as the best DJ in Indianapolis. I don't want to take any more from him. So, and I do keep it. I don't mind. Like, we get kids to call in, but I do like to keep it more adult than that. If that makes sense to you. I just think everybody else will do that. Like a ZPL will do that. I kind of want to keep it, do some 70s, do some throwbacks, do some 80s, generally speaking, probably the most often, and then like we're doing this week in the 90s. Hopefully that makes sense to you. I don't know if I'd really want to dip into that much of the 2000s. Maybe a little bit on the front end. Andy Moore, Automotive Group Hotline from Setting the Pace. Alex Golden does join us. Good afternoon, Alex. How you doing?
Hey, JMV, I'm doing good. How are you?
Get your latest conversation with Derek Schultz, I see here.
Yeah, that was a very fun conversation. Always enjoy talking with Derek. Everybody knows Derek. He does a great job just knowing the team, knowing the ins and outs of Indiana sports. So really enjoyed that conversation.
You could check it out. His conversation with Setting the Pace is with our friend Derek Schultz most recently. Your assessment on what we've seen, I explain Jarace Walker this way. I think what he has done, he has shown us what we expected and certainly hoped to see as, a more formidable, certainly a rotational player as a rookie to be productive and to help out this team. What else did he show you so far over the course of Summer League?
I just think one of the things that we didn't see as much as Houston as we saw now is just his ability to put the ball on the floor a little bit more, his ability to be defensive-minded all over the place. I feel like this is a very active guy, and he aggressively hunts rebounds, which I really like about him. I think that in the first game and the third game, we definitely saw him a little bit more active on the glass, and that was exciting. The three-point shot, obviously, it's a work in progress, which we kind of had a feeling that might be the case because he didn't shoot a ton at Houston, and he only shot 35% with few attempts. So, this is a good opportunity for him to work on that shot and figure things out. But just the feel he has for the game, the ability to take the ball off the glass, bring it up the floor. And if you know Rick Carlisle and you listen to his post-game press conferences, he'll always talk about playing with force. I don't think you're going to have to worry about that with Jarace Walker, hardly at all, because I feel like he's played very forceful for most of the times, and that's great to hear because at 19 years old, he definitely looks like he's ready to play right away, and he's got the body build for it too. So I think I've just been overall impressed with everything that he showcased.
Ben Sheppard, on the other hand, has been off, been on, been off, been on, which I think you can probably understand is going to happen most of the time. When it goes down, it looks good. When it doesn't, it has looked like a struggle. Again, much like anybody else. But what's been your thoughts on what you've seen from Ben Sheppard during the Summer League?
Yeah, I kind of think all three games you have to look at them very differently because the first game I feel like he was trying to get his feet wet, trying to figure out what his role was going to be with, a veteran-heavy team in Summer League for Nembhard and Mathern being there for their second year and Isaiah Jackson being in the mix and then Jarace. So he was kind of the fifth man in that game and really didn't get a chance to showcase much. The second game, I thought they looked for it a little bit more. I think Mathern had 6 assists in that game, and you could definitely tell that Sheppard looked more comfortable out there. And then this game, he kind of becomes the go-to scorer on the perimeter, and he really struggled with that. And I think his best role is going to be what we saw that game Monday night. And that's where he can really showcase what he can do. I think he's better off ball, that kind of stuff. But defensively, I've been impressed overall, though. I feel like he's done a good job. More switchable than I expected, but he's been able to switch on to bigger defenders. Did that quite a bit last night against the Thunder. So just continuing to see him grow is exciting. But, at the same time, this is why I think it's going to be hard for him to see minutes this season with the way the rotation's built. He's going to be a guy that's going to be more of a work in progress. And I don't think he's nearly as ready as Jarace is. But they're going to try to get him some minutes, obviously, this year. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be times when they want to get him a 3 or 4 game stretch here and there. But I just feel like he's a good player, but he's got a lot of work to do compared to Jarace Walker, and that's the only bad thing about it. I just think Jarace is so much far ahead.
Way too early to second guess, but I'll ask you anyway. And nobody's going to second guess about Jarace Walker. Any second guesses in the general vicinity in which the Pacers selected Ben Sheppard for you?
Yeah, it's tough. I was a big Leonard Miller guy. He's been playing pretty well in Summer League. That one does hurt a little bit. I also liked G.G. Jackson and taking a chance on him. I kind of knew the Pacers probably wouldn't go that route with that type of player that had so many red flags, so that didn't shock me. But like one of the draft analysts we had come on our show said, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to take Leonard Miller after taking Jarace Walker. So I get the whole Ben Sheppard thing. I think that he was a late draft riser. We'll see how it plays out. I'm not, like you said, it's too early to write him off. But at pick 26, it's really hard to be that upset about a pick because it was so late in the first round. But I also thought Leonard Miller was a really good player that could develop into what they're trying to build. And, Minnesota traded up to get him at like 33, I think, overall in the second round. And he's proven himself in Summer League. So that might be one that stings a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think Ben Sheppard will be okay because we know this team loves three-point shooting and they love defensive upside.
It's the Pacers Summer League team tagged with their first loss last night. I think back at it coming up tomorrow night, and now it's Golden of setting the pace. Joins us to talk about that and more on the Andy Moore Automotive Group Hotline. All right, who else maybe sticks out to you? Anybody stake their claim with a higher level of interest that maybe we weren't thinking about going in?
I mean, if you look at the 3 guys that we saw last year play for the Pacers and then Isaiah Jackson, he's been on the team for 2 years now, I was a little bit concerned with Isaiah Jackson's foul trouble. It's one of those things where, it's Summer League, but he got 14 fouls in 2 games, and I'm thinking to myself, for a third-year guy, the amount of times he jumps to block shots and gets himself out of position is a little bit concerning, but the numbers that he put up were also pretty good in terms of rebounds and points. So if he can just figure out the fouling, I think he'll be a lot better. Nembhard clearly showcased it. I think he was the best player in Summer League for the Pacers so far. I know Jarace Walker's been really impressive, but Nembhard is, to me, just a really good player and showcased that he could at Summer League. But I think he did it all season, too, just kind of showcased that he could be that guy that can run a second unit full-time if that's what they asked him to do this year. But if we're looking at new guys, I definitely think Kimball Brown has played pretty solid coming off of the injury. Guy, I feel like he travels every time he tries to put the ball on the floor and be a creator. But if he's catching and shooting and he's flashing and he's playing defense, then yes, I think that's where he can really thrive. Isaiah Wong, rough first game. The last 2 games have been pretty good. And I think Oscar Tshiebwe, this guy rebounds the basketball, does the dirty work. I think they've got some interesting players that, it might be worth the travel to Noblesville to watch them play this year.
I think Tshiebwe going to be able to carve any NBA level spot out. And I'd use it in terms of the Pacers need all the rebounding they can get. But I think what we have seen, and I'm still interested, and there's still room to grow, but I think we have seen the reason why he went undrafted. Have we not to this point? And has been so heralded, collegiately speaking.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think Oscar is a good college player, but even in college, you kind of saw some of his weaknesses. I think he kind of is who he is, but, the guy was a National Player of the Year. It doesn't hurt to take a flyer on him on a 2-way contract. Let him see what he can do with some development. I don't know if he's going to be able to be a good enough defender and do enough. He doesn't do enough offensively either besides rebounding and scoring close to the basket to be a major factor in the NBA, but you never want to write a guy off. He's got good work ethic, that's for sure, and he kind of knows what his role is. That's always a big thing, if you can accept your role and thrive in what you do well. So, but yeah, I definitely think he's going to be a G League kind of guy who maybe can play overseas. I think that there's definitely a path for him there, but in the NBA, it's tough, and there's only going to get more talent as we see more draft classes come in, and I just don't think he'll be one that can really stick around.
Alex, you mentioned the G League team moving to Noblesville. The Pacers' sports and entertainment expectations that they will draw considerably more with having it in a centralized location in Noblesville like that. Is that their thought, and do you believe that will occur?
Yeah, I don't really know if they think it's going to help their attendance, because I think it was pretty beloved in Fort Wayne. I just think that it's a little bit easier travel-wise for players to drive to Noblesville compared to driving all the way to Fort Wayne. I think it's more so the convenience of that. I don't even think they're actually playing this year. I think they're still building that facility, so I could have been mistaken by saying I'll travel this.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
I think, they're
still building
playing it. I think they're playing at the Fieldhouse this year, so I misspoke on that. But it's, I think that it will have a little bit more interest. I mean, someone that lives locally, I will definitely probably attend at least one or two games where I didn't go to any in Fort Wayne. So there could be a little bit more local appeal, but at the same time, it's the G League. I just don't know if it's ever going to take off like they probably wanted to. But give it time, and you get enough good players, and you get Oscar Sheboy. That's a Kentucky guy. Got a lot of Kentucky fans here in Indiana, unfortunately. So they'll be flooding probably to watch him play, and we always see that when there's a Devin Booker return, something like that. A lot of Kentucky jerseys in the building at Bankers Life. Wow. I am all over the place. Gamebridge Fieldhouse. Man, I can't remember their name for the life of me there. But that's how it always is when you see Kentucky players. So that probably will be a little bit of a draw.
It's Alex Golden here of Setting the Pace via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. How much of a belief do you have or have you had regarding the Pacer interest, especially going back to last week, when you get a guy like Mark Stein that presents it? And Mark Stein, much like you have, I mean, you were absolutely all over Bruce Brown. You were the first to hit that a couple of weeks ago coming up on Friday. But a guy like Mark Stein, who dropped that nugget in regarding Pascal Siakam, were you a believer in a lot of Pacers' interest, or is it just you think them feeling around basically every situation in general that occurs in the NBA like that?
Yeah, I think the Pacers were pretty adamant about wanting to make a splashy move this offseason. And, we talked to Derek Schultz about this on our podcast, and, he said that he felt like the Pacers were wanting to hit more of a home run than what they probably did. But what they did this offseason was still good. But, yeah, they didn't make that big splashy move. And I think Pascal instantly raises the floor and the ceiling of what this team can do in the playoffs. I think he's a very good player that fits. And I think the Pacers did call and see what the asking price would be. I'm not sitting here saying that I know anything insider. I mean, Mark Stein's been all over this, and I think Michael Grange as well has been reporting on this. And they've brought up some really good points. It makes a lot of sense. The Pacers probably would rather use the assets that they have in terms of picks versus their young core. I would be very nervous if I'm the Pacers trading one of Jarace Walker, Andrew Nembhard, or Benedict Mathurin to acquire Pascal Siakam on an expiring deal. So I don't think they would do that. But I think the Raptors have just really handled this whole thing poorly. And if you go back and look at the team that won the title in Toronto, I believe besides the Kyle Lowry sign and trade in Miami, they've lost every single player that was a part of that core for nothing. And if they don't watch themselves, I think they could really upset Pascal, because I do know that Jake Fischer was on, and it has been reported that Pascal doesn't want to sign an extension anywhere else. But if there's a reason he didn't come to Summer League and this marriage has gone bad a little bit, why would he re-sign a contract extension with them unless it's all about the money? I think that there's going to be some, feathers ruffled there with Pascal. And Jake Fischer even said that he didn't think that he would be able to start the year. And then OG Anunoby's got a player option. I mean, they literally could lose everybody that's been a part of that core for pretty much nothing, because I think they've handled how they've valued players. So the Pacers have to be very smart to not give up too much in a trade for Pascal. But I think at this point, just the timeline of the ages, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think the Pacers want to win now. Tyrese Halliburton wants to win now. The goal is to make the playoffs. But at the end of the day, you also have to look long-term while you're trying to win now. And if you're going to give up a very valuable asset or possibly multiple assets to get a guy like Pascal, you have to be sure that he's going to be here past this season. And if he's not, then I think it's a no deal, and you just move on and try to find something else. I think they've already got enough talent right now based off the offseason at the forward position. drafting Jarace Walker and then taking a flyer on a guy like Obi Toppin for just 2 second-round picks.
Hey, Alex, you mentioned too, Jake Fischer of Yahoo Sports, their NBA senior writer, was on with me a little bit earlier, and he was the one that has been mentioning recently the Phoenix interest in T.J. McConnell. And I know that the core members of the Pacers were front and center. TJ wasn't. He's not a core team-wise. I think he's a core member. I don't know how anybody views him as a core member with that group. So, if he showed up, you would view him as a core member. If he wasn't there, it does make you wonder a little bit more. You think there's anything behind that whatsoever? What he believes is going to be either here or someplace else with him not being there? I don't happen to think that it is, but do you?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it matters if you're a part of the core or not if you're there. Like, I'm not trying to be mean, but Jordan Moore was there as well. I don't think he.
No, you're right. You're right. Well, I mean, Obi Toppin hadn't been a part of the core yet. So, I mean, and he was there. So, I saw a lot of people, Alex, alluding to that possibility. Well, T.J. McConnell wasn't there because he knows the inevitable is coming. He's going to be someplace else. He may end up being someplace else, but I don't think that was the reason why he wasn't there.
No, and I honestly can't remember if TJ was even there last year. I don't feel like he was, but that's just me going up my memory. I don't know if he always goes out there or not to Las Vegas. So that could be just people trying to read into something that's not really there, which happens all the time, especially on social media. We see speculation after speculation based on something that happens, and TJ's not a social media guy either. But, yeah, I would just say this. I think that if TJ's not going to be here next year, it's probably a mutual agreement between the two, JMV, to move off of him. And I don't think that it's going to be this long, ugly, drag-out thing that some people might think. I don't think he really sees the writing on the wall. I think there's probably an opportunity for him to still be a part of this team if he takes a different role. But if he still feels like he has a lot left to give, I think the Pacers are going to do what's best and try to find a right landing spot for him. And a team like Phoenix would make a ton of sense because you want to take care of your players that you have here that you really value. And so if they do move on, somewhere like a Phoenix makes a ton of sense because he can get playing time and you're giving him a good opportunity to win something.
Yeah, they need players. There's no doubt about that, too. The whole Ayton thing makes me laugh still, though. I love it. I love it. You get new ownership in there. You get new head coach in there. Get new, basically everything, I guess. But, some players and James Jones. And, you got to deal with Ayton. That's awesome. So if I'm Chad Buchanan and Kevin Pritchard, I say, we were just kind of screwing with stuff right here. I would say that was going to be our move all the time. We just wanted to force the hand of Phoenix, even if it had really no reason to be doing it. I'd say it.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably not the greatest business front to come out with.
That's why I told Chad Buchanan. He kind of half-assed, serious and joking. I said, aren't you glad that you guys were saved by Phoenix matching your offer? And he got a kick out of it. They actually sent me a Miles Turner jersey because I mentioned that to him, which made me laugh too. But it's fun.
Well, I will say this: the only benefit they probably got out of doing that Ayton signing was one. Yeah, they kept their cap space free, so they could do the renegotiation with Miles, and I think it also motivated Miles. I think at the end of the day, Miles kind of seeing that probably gave him a little bit of a, one of those things where he's like, I just feel extra motivated now to prove my worth to this team. You guys wanted to move off of me for DeAndre Ayton. Well, I'm going to show you why that was a bad idea. So I think that it definitely worked in terms of motivating Miles even more if he needed any more motivation.
It's Alex Golden setting the pace. His latest conversation, podcast-wise, is with friend of this show, Derek Schultz. All right, man, I appreciate you. You think the Pacers are done right now, or you think they got some moves ahead of them here?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be anything sexy, but I definitely think they still have to kind of figure out the depth chart of this roster a little bit. I'm keeping my eyes very closely attached to George Hill if they decide to bring him back. That's not something they have to make a decision on probably until closer to training camp. So I would just keep an eye on that because 4 centers right now on the roster, that's probably one too many. Who's the odd man out? Is there going to be a trade that makes sense? The McConnell stuff, I can kind of understand why a trade would make sense there, but it's going to be interesting. I think they have to make one more roster move, though, because I think having a veteran like George Hill would be huge for this team. And I think last year they emphasized how important James Johnson and George Hill were to the culture of this locker room. If you let both those guys walk and don't really kind of fill that void.
Yeah.
I think that it's not problematic because I think this is a good group of guys, but I also think it just kind of helps build the right team morale that you want. So I'm expecting George Hill to be on the roster by the start of the season. I just don't know how they're going to get there.
So Alex Golden setting the pace, latest with Derek Schultz. Alex, I appreciate you, man. Have a great weekend, okay?
All right, JMV, thank you so much.
Alex Golden on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Where in the world can you get 100 ounces of draft beer in a bucket? It's not in Greene County, as many of you will guess, but it's close. That story and more. Chappell, top of the hour. Farm Aid tickets to give away, too. Win them before you're able to buy them. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
And 5, The Fan.
All right, I know you guys are aware, especially if you attended IU, of one of the bar staples down there called the Upstairs Pub. You guys aware, James? Are you aware of the Upstairs Pub? You don't know what the Upstairs Pub is? I remember the Upstairs Pub because it had a single bathroom between it and Hooligans that I used to go instead of utilizing the trough. It had a single bathroom where I felt like the whole environment in there was a more conducive to relieving yourself than it was standing at what everybody knew that as the trough at Hooligans back then. Great spot. I mean, just a tradition down on Kirkwood and Bloomington. This is what they have tweeted within the last hour. Traditions and rituals have to start somewhere. Introducing the brand new Bison Bucket from upstairs. Come by, talk to your bartender, and we'll take care of the rest. It is 100 ounces of draft beer, and you get to keep the bucket. It is literally a bucket. And I'm assuming it's a Bison bucket. I may be wrong about this. I'm just guessing because one year there was a Bison mascot, right? Was it 1 year? Maybe it was more than that. I can't remember if it was the dude that looked like the Nebraska Cornhusker mascot or if it was 1 year for the Bison. But anything, I think that is where the relation or the connection is right there. 100 ounces of draft beer, you get a bucket, and you get to keep it. I don't even know why they got glasses there. Don't you have to drink that from the bucket? The Bison Bucket, a brand new tradition, evidently, at the Upstairs Pub. And a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. And Matt says, how many days before this goes horribly wrong? Yeah. The Bison Bucket. I'm telling you guys that knew this too, especially when Hooligans was there, then it turned into what was called the BW3 that now is Buffalo Wild Wings. It was the first I knew that was around, and certainly the first one in Kirkwood in Bloomington. It made a transition to then BW3s after Hooligans. But man, Hooligans was a great spot, but there was always a single bathroom between Upstairs and Hooligans. That was always my preference over the dude trough. There was nothing ever good about the dude trough in Hooligans. The Bison Bucket, 100 ounces, Upstairs Pub, coming at you evidently right now. All right, Mike Chappell, other side. Again, the importance and when the clock is going to be ticking down to Jonathan Taylor getting that extension. That and more with Mike coming up next. I may be losing my 80s genius card here. I've not seen Raising Arizona in its entirety.
Might be Nick Cage's best movie.
Better than Valley Girl, come on now.
Oh, it's amazing.
I mean, he had a triangular shaved chest hair. And not only did he not look 18 in Valley Girl, he looked about 38 in Valley Girl. Hey, Randy, you going to go to the prom? Yeah, I'm going to go to the prom. I'm about 40. Look how I've shaved my chest hair in the form of a triangle. Yeah, Raising Arizona. Princess Bride. Nope. Not all of Back to the Future. I've seen it all, but just at different times. I get my card pulled if I'm not careful with that. Farm Aid tickets. Win them before you can buy them. One of the participants, you hear that re-entry, you cue to call number 9. Obviously, you can listen for that coming up here in the 5 o'clock hour, but on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, not too much time between now and the start of Colts camp, and then obviously not too far away, for example, from the Hall of Fame game, as preseason NFL will fire up certainly then. Mike Chappell of CBS 4 and Fox 59. He does join us. I want to start right here. This was with McAfee earlier this week with Jim Irsay. And the reason why I bring this up is because we've had this conversation a number of times.
I know where you're going.
With Shaquille Leonard. Yep. In terms of looking for anything that is positive, you come away with really a very simple Jim Irsay quote as not finding it a couple of days ago, correct?
It's no different than what we got from Shane Steichen during OTAs. And we've talked about this. Hey, I hope he's out there, what is it, the 25th or 26th when they practice for the first time. I hope he's out there and he's throwing us the bird because he's ready to play and he's tired of the haters. But doggone it, until he's out there, you're concerned. You should be concerned. And I didn't think the owner gave you any reason to say, I think things are going in a pretty good direction.
Do you think that is calculated? Compared to how we've been led in the past, and it's essentially, obviously, with Andrew Luck blown up in their face, do you think it's more of a calculated answer, or is it ultimately the fact that they just don't know?
Yeah, and don't you think with 2 weeks before camp or whatever, you should know?
Yes, you should.
And if you know that he's going to be ready because he's doing everything and all this, then that's what you say. You just say, yeah, hey, we're not going to push it, but he's ready to practice, and that's progress. That's tangible progress. To not have that, it just continues to fuel the concern and the skepticism over a guy who played 70-some snaps last year and none at his level. So we're going to talk to Chris Ballard the day before camp opens, whatever that Tuesday is, the 25th or whatever it is. My expectations are low. And I'm not going to be shocked if Shaq opens up camp on PUP again. Just because he's not quite ready and all that, and there's no way a team can spin that's a good thing. Looking at a calendar, it'll be like 9 months from the second surgery. And everybody agrees, the team and Shaq and everybody, that they pushed it too much last time. I think he was back on the practice field in some level 3 months after surgery, and everybody says it was wrong. Well, this is 9 months. And this isn't like we have a track record of something to compare this with. We don't, and we can't compare it to the last time because it didn't work and it was wrong. So I don't know. I hope I'm wrong, and we've given Shaq a lot of ammunition now to say, yeah, you bunch of haters, you know what you're talking about, and that's fine. If that makes him better, makes him all-pro, good for him. It's just that when you still get these ambiguous well, he's making progress and he's working hard. All these guys are working hard, for crying out loud. It's their job. But that's like whenever when a team goes out and plays and, well, the energy was there. Well, no crap. That's your, I hope when you go into work, most of the time, the effort is there. Now, sometimes you're probably tanking it, but doggone, I just don't get good vibes because the team isn't providing any. And come when camp opens, we're going to know either he's really making progress and he's on the right track, which to me means he's at least practicing. Maybe it's every other day, maybe it's every other drill, but he's practicing. But if he opens up on PUP, why would you expect him to be ready for the season or to be much of a factor early in the season? You shouldn't.
No, I agree. I happen to think that we're being told without being told, Mike, if that makes sense. And people are going to point the finger at me for being negative. Oh, you're just always negative. No, I mean, that's just, I don't know how you really read this any other way presently.
To me, again, I understand how teams, maybe this one especially, you have been burned in the past by, he's making progress and we expect him ready for camp and this, that, and the other, and then it doesn't happen. If we say, wait a minute, you said he was going to be ready, so that's why they hedge their bets. This is different. This is just different. I just have to believe that 2 weeks out from camp, they know. They know, they've got a pretty good idea that, yes, he's going to be ready, or no, he needs more time. And that's fine if you need more time. But I just don't know if you need more time after 9 months. I don't know why anyone should anticipate him being much of a factor early in the season. And the longer it goes, we're talking about a guy's career, so it's sort of careful ground. But we're talking football. We're not talking his life and how's he going to be as a dad and all this. We're talking football. And at some point, you have to wonder, can he get back to where he was? The All-Pro and the tackles and the interceptions and the takeaways. And in football terms, you need him to be back because he is that good. But the longer it goes to where you're getting nothing concrete from the team, and we'll really know come Grand Park in a couple of weeks, we'll know by whether he's practicing or not. We'll know what to expect the first part of the year. I really believe that.
It's Mike Chappell of CBS 4 and Fox 59. He's with us via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So what do you got in your mind, hard target-wise, for an extension of whatever sort it's going to end up being for running back Jonathan Taylor? What do you got date-wise?
That's the good question. And I don't know. I saw something, 3 weeks into camp. I mean, you either agree to term, you can agree to where you need to be or you can't. I saw something where that the Giants with Barkley, it's one side wants to give 13 and one side wants 16. And I'm kind of guessing that's where the Colts and Taylor are. The Colts would love to give him that Nick Chubb 3 years, $36.6 million. And if I'm the team, I'd give him that in a minute. And he's probably wanting closer to the 15, 16 million a year, which that's what he should want. We've said he's their best player. You can argue different guy. I think he's their best player. He might be their most valuable player in terms of helping either Richardson or Minshew not have to do too much too early. But, it's that old running back thing, and I would be fine giving him a contract worth $14, $15 million. That's really, in real money, a 2-year deal. You can add a couple years to make the numbers look really cool for an agent and all this stuff, but as we've talked, if he plays this year, it's $4 million. Franchise him, it's probably, $12 million next year, and then franchise again, it's $14. So roughly you're talking $28 million for 3 years, guaranteed. So I don't know. And as we've talked, and I still believe, you get it done because it needs to get done as your best player. You have always rewarded your own who have been productive, who've been, contributors off the field. He's done it the right way. And, yeah, you're going to overpay because running backs aren't worth on the market $14, $15 million. But you always overpay for your own. They overpaid for Shaq. They overpaid for Braden Smith. You overpay for your own. So I just think it makes sense. Unless Taylor's asking for really, 3 years guaranteed, which I don't know that I would do that because there is a shorter life for a running back that it just gets done because it makes no sense not to get done, to mangle the grammar.
Well, I mean, and to me, I prioritized it. I don't care what anybody says about the overall value of that position around the NFL with the quarterback that you want to start in week number 1, which clearly Jim Irsay does. From that conversation with Pat 2 days ago, it is essential you have Jonathan Taylor as a part of this because the quarterback, this offense, that team needs him. They need that support.
But you're going to have him either way. He's not going to sit out because he's under contract. I mean, you're going
I understand that, but I think you need it longer than just the initial season here.
I agree, and to go back to compare a little bit, Peyton Manning always insisted that Edgerrin James was the most important part of that offense. Now they had some great pieces around him, so it's different. But whether it's Richardson, unless Richardson proves he's not ready. Yeah. I think he should start. Or Minshew, that running game, if the offensive line can get back to where it needs to be, they're going to run the ball regardless of who the quarterback is. Of course, Richardson will give you another dimension to the run game. But, yeah, I just think on the market says that the running back's not worth that now. But in Indy, he is. And he has shown that. He had run for 1,200 yards last year. If the lineup played better, even with the bum ankle. So he's still relatively young. He's that important. You get it done. Unless he's asking for something ridiculous, you just get it done.
No doubt about that. What other storylines as we get ready to tackle the start of training camp up at Grant Park in Westfield are you looking out for besides those two obvious ones? And obviously the one of the transition with the inexperience of the rookie quarterback. And what we hope and the owner hopes is a week 1 start.
Offensive line. I mean, period. What else matters? In the non-quarterback category, it's all about the offensive line. Look what it did last year when it played so poorly, certainly early, and then it kind of got better, but by then it didn't matter. And they did virtually nothing to improve the line other than getting a new line coach, which maybe they think that means a ton. But if the offensive line plays okay, nothing great, just plays okay, and is middle of the pack, you hope better, but middle of the pack, the running game will work, protection will be good enough, and the quarterback can function and the running back can function. Jonathan Taylor is good enough that just give him a good line, not top 5, but a good line, and he's gonna win games for you. So, and the problem is we're not going to know, I don't think, the first 2-3 weeks in training camp whether the line's any good or not. Probably not until the Bears come in for those joint workouts. Maybe the first preseason game with Buffalo, I guess it is. But I think if the offensive line works, this team will be competitive and things will work. If it doesn't, I just don't see how I don't see how they're really competitive. And boy, a top 2 or 3 pick in next year's draft would certainly be reachable.
I'm trying to know if they do transform back into a much better workable group than they were a year ago. Where are we going to place blame first about last year? Chris Strasser, Matt Ryan, just the entire messed up situation in general? Because, I mean, it seems like a lot, does it not, Mike, to ask for that group that played at that level a year ago to be transformed because of a rookie quarterback and his athleticism and, just some hope mixed in there? Is that a lot to ask?
I just don't see how you can read it any other way than the problem was Chris Strasser. I don't know how you read it, because they bring their starting route back intact, and a couple of the backups are back. They let a couple guys go, which they should have, but then they had two rookies. So it's like they're telling the new guy, okay, here you go, make this work. And I think that's risky. I would have signed a veteran guy, and there's still, I think, a really good chance that when cuts are made in late August, that there's probably 2 or 3 players that'll make the roster in the 53 that won't be here at the start of camp, because you always find guys, that are better than what you got, although people don't get rid of good offensive linemen. You just don't. So, yeah, I don't know how you say, well, it wasn't Chris Strasser. Well, it was because you brought everybody else back. So hopefully it works. If it does, I think there's enough. There are enough pieces. Receivers, not good, not great. Running back, great. Tight ends, good. Certainly not great, but young. And then the defense. I don't mean this as a shot at Gus Bradley. I don't care. I don't care about the defense. I just don't. This is all to me about the offense growing together, and the defense. Obviously, get out there and be as good as you can be. But all the moves you make and the focus really needs to be, and that's why Jonathan Taylor is so important, and Michael Pittman. We've not even talked about him.
Yeah, who's going to be the most disappointed with their extension, you think, in this case? Is it going to be Jonathan Taylor or Michael Pittman Jr., or will both be happy, both be sad? What's going to happen?
I don't know. I just can't see them giving Michael Pittman market money for a number one receiver. I just don't. I think he's a really good receiver, but I don't think he's a one. I mean, now last year he had no chance because the offense was so god-awful. But I think in Michael Pittman's mind, he wouldn't mind hitting the open market. I think he thinks, and he's probably right, that somebody's going to pay him more in the open market than the Colts will. We've talked about this, how to a great degree Chris Ballard has shown his commitment to the position. He's done, is it 3 or 4 second-round picks, which is doing something. But as far as reinvesting in that guy, he didn't even re-sign Paris Campbell, for crying out loud, for as little as Paris Campbell got. So I think Michael Pittman won't be overly PO'd if he doesn't get one, because I think Michael Pittman thinks he's going to hit it really big on the open market. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they re-sign him, because it makes more sense to reinvest longer term in a top receiver than a running back. But then to flip it around, your running back is better than your wide receiver. So they've got work to do. They know what they want to do. They know what they're going to do. I will be surprised. They need to get Taylor done. I'll be surprised if they get Pittman done. I really will.
Here's my situation. I agree with you on how you describe Michael Pittman Jr., but I can't spend the better part of 6-7 years whining and crying about wide receivers and then watch them just let somebody hopefully go off to greener pastures, at least for him individually. I can't sit here and do that. I mean, and I understand where if he's going to want too much money, you got to let him go. That's just a bad look, I think, for all of us if they feel that necessary. If Pittman thinks he's that overvalued and organizationally Chris Ballard and company believe is not worth it, that's a bad look for everybody.
Well, but I tell you, I think if they don't re-sign Pitt, and I hope they do. I like the kid. He's good to work with. I think he's a good player. I just don't know that he's 24, 25 million good player. But I think if they re-sign Taylor, they don't sign Pitt, and he plays on his rookie deal, which I'm guessing it's $3 or $4 million. I haven't looked at it. And then he goes free agency and gets that big contract. I really don't think we're going to sit here and say, man, the Colts should have done that. Because I think we all you're right about.
What if they don't have the options though? We won't if they have other options, other significant, maybe even surprising options, productive options for help. But if they don't, that's the bad luck.
But the problem's going to be is he'll hit free agency before you have your options. So next year he'll be a free agent before you know. Well, yeah, we let him go, but we're bringing in this guy. And if you think you can sign a free agent to replace Michael Pittman, you're going to overpay for that. You're going to pay $20-some million for a free agent. They've not signed free receivers for $20 million combined. So it's a difficult situation when you hit on your draft picks. You really hit on them. These guys are quality players. And then it comes time to re-sign them, and that's a good problem to have. But it's still a problem. And these both are very unique. I think Pittman even more so because, again, it makes too much sense to re-sign Taylor. Pittman is just different because I don't know who considers him a bona fide one besides Pitt and guys close to him, and he should. But I don't know how many people who cover this team and have followed Pitt and what they do say, yeah, I can really argue that he's worth $22, $23 million a year. And that's going to come out as a negative on Pittman, and I don't mean it to be. It's trying to be realistic. But I think we'll all be more nodding in approval if they don't extend Pitt. But then, like you said, then you got to replace him because then you got Alec Pierce and Josh Downs and Ashton Newland again. I mean,
Isaiah McKenzie. Maybe.
Yeah,
who knows?
Okay, yeah.
I know, you know what I mean. So yeah, I had to mention him. Yeah, he's got experience. So yeah,
right. But again, when you don't re-sign him, it creates the hole of you've got to bring in another guy. You know, maybe their long-term thing is they're looking at Marvin Jr. You know, which is I'm half joking, but maybe not. So it's easy not to re-sign guys at the top of your depth chart. It's really hard to replace them.
I guess I look at it this way. If you're willing to blame the offensive line, which I don't know if that is the tack they're taking, but if you're willing to blame the offensive line woes a year ago, you know, on the quarterback starting right there, and maybe all the other outside influences that were going on, whatever, but are you equally as willing to blame the lack of so-called creating space, windows, and production from Michael Pittman Jr. on what took place a year ago and blame it on Matt Ryan as everything normally is going to be moving forward? Which one are you more to blame it on? The subpar type of seasons and the question marks we have about not just the offensive line positions in general, but Michael Pittman Jr. moving forward as wide receiver?
I thought most of last season with Pittman was offense related. No protection. The quarterback couldn't move, and then the quarterback's arm was shot. But he was also, I mean, I was talking to some guys with the team, and they weren't real happy with his separation and being able to get open. So there's a combination there, but I place that more on how dysfunctional the offense was. Like I said, it is really, really hard to catch 99 passes and not get 1,000 yards. It really is. They turned that into a dink and dunk, and maybe he could have done more. Probably he could have done more. But I thought the entire receiving corps, the tight ends, were so handicapped by the quarterback / offensive line / offense. So it's to some degree it's really hard to evaluate Michael Pittman last year. It really is. Maybe maybe he comes out this year and has 90 catches for 1,200 yards. I don't know, and 10 touchdowns. But to this point, he's not been able. He's either not shown you or been able to show you what you need to see to say, yeah, this guy deserves 5 years, $90 million, or whatever the math is. So I don't know. It's tough. I'm sure they've had these talks. Shane Steichen's got the new set of eyes on these guys. You know, Chris Ballard really, really likes JT and Pitt and some of these guys. Maybe Shane Steichen says, yeah, I've seen better. Not with Taylor, but with Pitt. So maybe that's one reason that Paris Campbell's not back, is Shane Steichen thought, yeah, he's a good player, but we can replace him easily. And they went out and got McKenzie. So, but and they're going to tell us what they think by their actions. They will, with re-signing Taylor or not, or extending Pittman or not, and all that. And it's going to be so interesting to watch how things develop. And we've not even talked much today about the quarterback situation and how they handle that. So it's going to be a really interesting 13 practices up at Grant Park.
All right, really quick in closing here, completely off the page. We haven't heard from him. We don't know if we are going to hear from him. I doubt if we hear from him. But if there's anybody around here that could get 5 or 10 minutes with Jeff Saturday, I would suggest it could be you. Have you tried? And might we ever get the rest of the story here about what all went down last year? Or is he going to save all this because he so cares, obviously, about his image, certainly as a player as it stands here?
I've not tried to get him because I don't know why I haven't. That's a cop-out. I have not. First of all, I just don't know what he would say, and I don't know how much of what he would say I would believe at face value. I didn't like the way things ended last year and how there wasn't a lot of accountability with a lot of people. And so maybe his interview comes when he's hired back at ESPN, which is firing everybody. So I don't know. And maybe it's smart that he doesn't talk because of his loyalty to the team. And to me, I don't know how he gives a realistic account without ripping the franchise to some level. You know, there was so much blame to go around, including himself. So I don't know. It's interesting. We've talked in the press room about him not being out there at all. And he was always, KB would have him on all the time in the morning. And,
right.
And I'd talk to him a lot of times this is interim coach time. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe somebody will have more of a desire. I just don't know how much he would give, and I'm not sure how much he would give. I could.
Well, I guarantee you that he would like to tell some people, some of those that put together and then signed the petition, where to go. But at the same time, you believe that he certainly would like to preserve his legacy as a player, ring of honor guy right now. So,
and he's talked to a few media guys here and let them know that he didn't appreciate how he was a convenient dumping ground for things. But he was interim coach, for crying out loud.
Yeah, it comes with the territory. Yeah.
Exactly. So, maybe somebody gets him, but I would need to be able to see both sides and how he accepted his role in what was an absolute circus the last 6 weeks or so. I mean, 33-0 for crying out loud. 33-0. So I don't know, and it'll be interesting to read if someone ever pins him down.
So Mike Chappell of CBS 4 and Fox 59 on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline as the clock is ticking for the start of Colts camp. And Mike, as always, every Thursday right here. I appreciate you. Have a great weekend.
I'll catch you next week.
All right, quick break. We'll come back. Farm Aid tickets to give away to Final Less Than 30 right here on a Thursday. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
If your wedding anniversary
Jake Fischer, Yahoo NBA reporter, talked trade rumors. Pascal Siakam, T.J McConnell, trade rumors, and more earlier. Alex Golden setting the pace was in here. We talked about Summer League and what we've seen so far from Jarace Walker and others. Pacers back at it tomorrow night in Vegas. Kyle Neddenriep of the Star earlier. We are on the verge, not too far away now from starting the high school football season. That and the Kanon Catchings story of moving on to be a part of Overtime Elite down in Atlanta. Kyle Neddenriep and Mike Chappell. Yeah, various Colts items here before the start of training camp. Via, again, the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. You can find these interviews if you missed any of them, 1075thefan.com in podcast form. This date, July the 13th, 1985. You guys remember that? 1985, Live Aid took place. Wembley Stadium in London. Here was the list. I'm going to have you guess which one. I'm going to put this on Twitter a little bit later, too. Which one would you rather see? Wembley Stadium in London. Adam Ant, Boomtown Rats. David Bowie, Phil Collins. Elvis Costello, Dire Straits. Brian Ferry, Elton John. Howard Jones, Nick Kershaw. Alison Moyet, Queen. Of course, Queen was probably the most noted performance out of both locations. Sade, Spandau Ballet, Status Quo, Style Council, Sting, U2, Ultravox, Paul Young, Wham, and The Who. Those were the participants at Wembley Stadium in London on this date back in 1985. JFK Stadium in Philadelphia had Bryan Adams, The Cars, Eric Clapton, Duran Duran, Boy George. And obviously a lot of these were going to be conducive to being incredibly popular in 1985. A lot of new wave 1980s bands involved here too. Duran Duran, Boy George. Hall & Oates, Mick Jagger. Billy Joel, Waylon Jennings, Judas Priest, Chris Christopherson, Huey Lewis and the News, Robert Plant, Power Station, Pretender, Santana, Paul Simon, Simple Minds, Tears for Fears, The Temptations, Thompson Twins, Neil Young, and Stevie Wonder. I'll tell you what. I don't know how many of you, if any of you happen to be a part, especially the one that was in Philadelphia. I often ask this question, especially this time of year, because we had Live Aid going on, and then remember Hands Across America? And I know a lot of you out there participated, a lot of you out there listening participated in that. But man, what a couple of shows right there. That would just set you up for life. You basically saw them. This date, 1985. Pretty impressive right there. I did not say Huey Lewis in the nude. Huey Lewis and the News. It's great. Charles writes this, Ballard got a couple more years with a new quarterback, but at some point he has to be held accountable for the team's failure. Saturday was the least of their issues. There's no doubt. But let me tell you this, because he's going to get at least 3 more years, Charles, like it or loathe it. Seriously. That's what we said back then. I mean, you're not going to make a significant quarterback change for the long-term future and a coaching change and then a general manager change at the same time. And Jim Irsay stuck with the general manager. I just want to know, and I don't know if we're ever going to find out, because you do understand this, that Jeff Saturday does. He does embrace his legacy here, certainly as a player. But wouldn't you really like to know how things went down according to Jeff? Don't you at some point? Don't you find out? Doesn't he come out and say something at some point? I don't even know what he's doing next year. Or this year, I should say. I say next year, but this year. But at some point, don't you find out? That's why I asked Mike Chappell that, because if there was anybody around here that would be capable of maybe reeling in, and I know that both Kevin and Jake had him on all the time. Now, twofold here. I mean, that was a paid thing every single morning, and I don't know. I don't know if you'd want to do something radio-wise. Like, this sounds more like a Q&A with a writer, and especially a writer that has been around here longer than anybody else writing about that team. So that's why I brought up the thought with Mike. I would love to know. I just don't think, as I mentioned to Mike Chappell, I don't know if you're ever going to get, this is very Paul Harvey of me here, the rest of the story. Because, again, preservation of certainly the playing image, and obviously how he feels, even with the circumstances and how they prevailed about Jim Irsay. And assuming that hasn't changed. Again, maybe it has, but I'm assuming that it hasn't changed. Podcast of that conversation, especially the end of it with Mike Chappell at 1075thefan.com. I mentioned that incredible concert in 85 Live Aid, both in London and Philadelphia. Farm Aid, which began, I believe, as well in 1985. Did it not, in Champaign, Illinois in 1985? Farm Aid is coming to Central Indiana, coming up in September, in fact, at Ruoff Home Mortgage Music Center. Tickets go on sale coming up on Saturday. I've got a chance for you coming up before the end of the show to win them before you can buy them. Farm Aid, featuring Neil Young, John Mellencamp, Dave Matthews and Tim Reynolds, Willie Nelson, and more. September, Ruoff Home Mortgage Music Center. Thank you, Live Nation, for always utilizing this show, and the station for that matter, to give away tickets to not just incredible local sports fans, but incredible local music fans. They just love music and want to be a part of something. Give you a chance to win those before the top of the hour. Don't go anywhere. It's 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. This would be 90s Mellencamp right here. Ruoff Home Mortgage Music Center, Noblesville, September the 23rd. And again, 85 is when Farm Aid started. I was going to reference Live Aid. I was just talking about that, but Farm Aid started in 1985 as well. Mellencamp's a part of it. Neil Young, Willie Nelson, Dave Matthews, and Tim Reynolds, Margot Price, Bob Weir, Nathaniel Ratliff, and the Night Sweats, Lucas Nelson, Allison Russell, the String Cheese Incident, and Particle Kid. Ticket sales begin July the 15th. That's on Saturday. You can win them right now before you buy them. Thank you very much. 239-1070, number 9 is going to go on us and win them before you can buy them. Saw this from Jeff Rabjohns. I think the expectation is later on tonight, finally, one of the reasons why I wanted to tune into Summer League is because I wanted to see Summer League Trace Jackson Davis. The Hoosier All-American scheduled to make his NBA Summer League debut tonight at 7 on ESPN for the Golden State Warriors. I think it's a hamstring or something. But his Golden State debut is later on tonight. That's 7 o'clock again on ESPN. Guys, get a look-see at Trace Jackson Davis. Jim McCann of Southern California writes this. So JMV with Anthony Richardson at quarterback, he absolutely needs to be supported with the talents of both Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr. I think it's pretty simple to me. The Colts need to give both of them their money. I am confident more from talking to Mike Chappell that it'll be more involved in making sure Jonathan Taylor is satisfied than right now maybe ultimately being able to satisfy Michael Pittman Jr. For what, Mike can mention a couple of different times what he expects Michael Pittman Jr. and company will want out of this. And what I mentioned to Mike was pretty simple. I just thought, to me, I can't sit here for 8 years whining and crying about wide receivers, and then the first time it's time to pay up for somebody to go, oh, yeah, well, you know what? Just let him go. Now, I guess you do have to look at the production compared to exactly how much Michael Pittman Jr. wants, how he views himself, how his representation views him, how they believe he should be compensated. But I have said this, and I do, unless you come up with another alternative. Until that point in time, I don't know how much of a choice you're going to have because you would like to see, right, these guys all grow together. And the other aspect is, and I know things can change, that whole dynamic can change at any moment. But this has been, organizationally speaking, a team that would like to re-sign their own. But, yeah, I know what you mean. You can say, well, I mean, look at the great results over the past 6+ years, and you're not wrong about that. I just don't want to be hypocritical here and, whining and crying about wide receivers for as many years as I have, and then, the first chance you got to pay one, and especially if you got to pay a little bit more than what you believe that wide receiver's worth, the worth is still going to be helping out your incredibly inexperienced quarterback. Man, I'm sorry about that, Eric. Anybody that can't get through right now, I apologize, but it is kind of the way that it goes there. My apologies. I'd give you a chance every week to win something, and hopefully at some point, Eric, somebody like yourself that's a great listener gets through. Who did win, by the way?
Patrick Irish won.
Patrick Irish is going to go see Farm Aid. It's nice. Each and every week we give you the opportunity. Hopefully each and every week we give you the opportunity. Hey, JMV, you were talking about a 90s band a little bit earlier, coming up in Broad Ripple at the Vogue on Friday. Who are you referencing? That was Situation Grey. Remember the days of the 90s when you have all these local bands playing in and around Indy, in and around Bloomington, Lafayette, Muncie. Situation Grey was one of those. Real Eyes, Johnny Sacco, Chosen Few, The Y Store, Push Down and Turn. Maybe a little bit older, but somewhat in the same vein, Oliver Syndrome. Situation Gray is going to get back together and play coming up at the Vogue on Friday night. A good friend of ours, Rick Pike, is going to be a part of it. But I was always a big fan of Situation Gray. A lot of alternative, a little bit of a dark edge alternative. And it's the first time I'd ever seen a band, a local kind of cover band do like techno stuff. Guys, I don't know if they're going to do this or not. This is like, they did like Lords of Acid back in the early 90s. If you guys remember that techno band, it didn't get much more wild than that. But Situation Gray gets back together tomorrow night on the stage at the Vogue, and I promise you that will be a great time. The other thing that's going on here downtown is with Indiana Black Expo going on, firing up this weekend. I think they have that free concert for you, which features just an all-time great, the OJs, and El DeBarge of DeBarge is going to be a part of that coming up tomorrow. So there's going to be a lot to do around here. I don't even know what's going on at Ruoff, what's going on at TCU, and other places. But this has been a great summer if you're on the lookout for a great time and a great band. No doubt about that. Yeah, hopefully if you tried to get in and you did not for Farm Aid, at some point for something that you like, you do get through. And we shall do that coming up again tomorrow. Yeah, Brian Fitzwater says, wasn't there a band called Punch Judy once? Indeed, Punch Judy. There was one out of Bedford that was in the 90s. You guys remember this? It was called Stone Carnival. Whenever I have Clayton Anderson on, at times we brought up Stone Carnival. Stone Carnival did a great cover of the Rolling Stones and Miss You. They had the big-haired, lovely ladies of Lawrence County all aflutter back in the 1990s. Stone Carnival. Yeah, Punch Judy was absolutely one right there. I'd love to go over those of the past. That's fantastic. I had the biggest crush on Kelsey of Realize ever. And obviously, she had no idea of my existence, which is par for the course. Great job from you, James. Thank you. Jake Fischer of Yahoo, Alice Golden setting the pace, Mike Chappell, CBS 4 and Fox 59, and Kyle Neddenriep of the Star. More chances for Farm Aid tickets and a fired-up Friday with Pat Sullivan in studio and your chance to win stuff coming up tomorrow at 3. Have a great